As the world navigates a landscape of political upheaval, social reform, and rising security concerns, questions loom large over the decisions shaping our global future. Can diplomacy achieve peace in conflicts long thought intractable? Will accountability finally catch up with leaders who defy democratic norms? And as societies confront deep-rooted issues, from gender-based violence to the regulation of technology, how far are governments willing to go to protect their citizens while balancing freedom and rights? Today, we bring you a series of reports that reflect these pressing questions. Welcome to the Flash News. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Tensions around the Russia-Ukraine war deepened today following revelations surrounding a leaked phone call between the United States real estate mogul Steve Witkoff and a senior Russian government aide. Well, the tape, which U.S. intelligence sources have confirmed as authentic, captures Witkoff discussing potential terms of a future peace settlement, and included what he described as possible concessions that could be explored to bring an end to the war. Though Witkoff holds no official government office, his proximity to powerful political circles has raised alarm in Washington and Europe. In the leaked audio, the Russian aide appears to press for recognition of Russia's security concerns and a reframing of territorial negotiations, suggesting the Kremlin may be testing how far American intermediaries, especially those close to influential figures, might be willing to go. The Kremlin has not denied the authenticity of the conversation, but instead described it as part of ongoing dialogues with global actors who seek peace. That framing has intensified Western concerns that Russia may be attempting to shape unofficial channels to influence the United States' positioning ahead of any future negotiations. Well, back in the United States, the reaction has been divided. Security analysts warn that Russia could be using private American figures to probe weaknesses, sow divisions, or extract early concessions that formal United States negotiators would never offer. Critics argue that the call risks blurring the line between official diplomatic processes and private informal negotiation attempts that could undermine Ukraine's standing. Well, when President Donald Trump was asked about the leaked call, he publicly defended Steve Witkoff, calling the conversation standard negotiation protocol and insisting that talking to all sides is how peace begins. Let's take a listen of what Donald Trump had to say.
That's a standard thing, because he's got to sell this to Ukraine. He's got to sell Ukraine to Russia. That's what a deal maker does. You got to say, look, they want this. You've got to convince them with this. That's a very standard form of negotiation. I haven't heard it, but I heard it was standard negotiation. And I would imagine he's saying the same thing to Ukraine, because each party has to give and take.
So you're not worried that he's too pro-Russian?
No, I think, look, this war could go on for years, and Russia's got a lot more people, got a lot more soldiers, So I think if Ukraine can make a deal, it's a good thing. I think it's great for both. Frankly, I think it's great for both.
Oh, well, President Donald Trump's comments have created fresh political ripples, with some lawmakers arguing that such statements signal a potential softening of the United States resolve, while others view it as a strategic posture towards eventual conflict de-escalation. Ukrainian officials, meanwhile, have expressed frustration, warning that any suggestion of unilateral concessions only strengthens Russia's military and political confidence. Kyiv's positions remain firm. No negotiations that legitimize territorial loss or undermine Ukrainian sovereignty. The broader geopolitical implications are significant. Moscow could see this moment as an opportunity to exploit the United States' political shift, global fatigue with the war, and risking calls, especially in Europe, for a negotiated end. While Washington, on the other hand, faces the challenge of managing internal political divisions while preserving a united NATO front. And beyond diplomacy, we see the conflict on the ground remains brutal. Fighting in the Donetsk axis continues, with intensified drone warfare, artillery exchanges, and Russia's ongoing attempt to stretch Ukrainian defenses thin. Humanitarian corridors remain unstable, with over 1 million civilians affected by infrastructure breakdowns. The leaked Witkoff call adds yet another layer to a war already shaped by political messaging, battlefield realities, and global diplomatic maneuvering. Whether this incident becomes a footnote or a turning point, it will depend on how the major actors respond in the coming days. And in Brazil, in a historic moment for the Brazilian democracy, we see that former President Jair Bolsonaro has begun serving a 27-year prison sentence for orchestrating a failed coup aimed at preventing Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva from assuming office after the 2022 presidential election. Bolsonaro, a former army captain and brash populist leader, reshaped Brazil's right-wing politics and polarized the nation during his tenure. The Supreme Court conviction came after Bolsonaro exhausted all legal appeals, confirming his role in a plot that included plans to overthrow the government and allegedly assassinate Lula. Now, prosecutors noted that the plan ultimately failed due to lack of support from the military's top brass, highlighting divisions within Brazil's armed forces and the resilience of the democratic system. Bolsonaro, age 70, had been under house arrest before his detention at police headquarters in Brasilia for tampering with his ankle monitor using a soldering iron.
Você usou alguma coisa para queimar isso aqui?
Eu tinha ferro quente aí.
Ferro quente?
Curiosidade.
Que ferro foi? Ferro de passar?
Não, ferro de solda.
Ferro de solda, aquele que tem uma ponta?
Sim.
Of NDTV World, it shows the moment the ex-president of Brazil was asked about tampering his ankle monitor, to which he admitted to using soldering iron out of curiosity, and later emphasized having hallucinations and anxiety due to the medicines he's been taking. While his confinement in a small monitored room equipped with basic amenities underscores the tension between political accountability and human rights considerations for high-profile prisoners. Now, here's what the current president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has to say about Jair's arrest.
The court has decided, it's settled. He will serve the sentence that the court has determined, and everyone knows what he did, so I have no further comment.
Well, the imprisonment overall is a landmark event in Latin American politics, sending a clear message against political extremism. It may, however, deepen societal polarization. Bolsonaro supporters may frame him as a martyr, while critics see the conviction as a victory for the rule of law and democratic norms. Well, international observers note that Brazil's handling of the case will likely influence the region's perception of political accountability and judicial independence. Italy, on the other hand, has taken a historic step in criminal justice reform, with Parliament unanimously passing a law that criminalizes femicide. The murder of a woman motivated by gender is now punishable by life imprisonment. Now, here's what Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has to say about that.
Pleased with the unanimous approval in Parliament of the government bill introducing the crime of femicide. It is an important sign of political cohesion against barbarity and violence against women. We are adding another tool to those we had already planned, from strengthening the Red Code to doubling the resources for anti-violence centers and shelters. These are concrete steps that are obviously not enough. We must continue to do more every day to defend the freedom and dignity of every woman.
The legislation aims to confront Italy's persistent issue of gender-based violence, which has claimed hundreds of lives annually and sparked widespread public outrage. Femicide as a distinct crime reflects the recognition that gender-motivated murders are not merely ordinary homicides, but are often rooted in structural and societal inequalities, including misogyny, domestic power imbalances, and cultural norms that trivialize violence against women. Activists argue that the law strengthens deterrence, empowers law enforcement, and affirms Italy's commitment to human rights and gender equality. The law also resonates with a broader international movement to protect women's rights, aligning Italy with countries like Spain and France that have adopted similar measures. Expert notes that beyond punishment, legislative reform must be paired with education, social services, and support systems for women at risk, signaling a holistic approach to preventing gender-based violence. Well, back to the United States, 2 members of the National Guard are in critical condition after being shot in downtown Washington, D.C., prompting an urgent federal investigation. The attack occurred near the National Guard deployment zone, close to the city center, where the 2 Guardsmen were stationed as part of routine security operations. FBI Director Christopher Wray confirmed that the FBI is leading the investigation, describing the situation as fast-moving and extremely serious. Authorities have identified the suspect as Ramanullah Lakanwal, a 29-year-old Afghan national. According to law enforcement sources, Lakanwal entered the United States in 2021 under an immigration program that followed the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan. Officials say the motive for the shooting remains under investigation. Amongst those who have reacted to this, Governor Patrick Morrisey of West Virginia had this to say. Let's take a listen.
This was an act of unspeakable violence. Our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers go out to the brave service members, their families, and the units who are enduring this terrible tragedy. Just know, we're going to keep working to make sure that justice is served.
Well, following the shooting of National Guards, President Trump gave a speech doubling down on the punishments to come to the perpetrators. Let's take a listen.
My great fellow Americans, earlier today on the eve of the Thanksgiving holiday, 2 members of the National Guard serving in Washington, D.C. were shot at point-blank range in a monstrous ambush-style attack just steps away from the White House. They had been deputized as part of the most successful public safety and national security mission in the history of our nation's capital, the D.C. Safe and Beautiful Task Force, which has achieved an unprecedented reduction in violent crime and crimes of all type. This heinous assault was an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror. It was a crime against our entire nation. It was a crime against humanity. The hearts of all Americans tonight are with those 2 members of the West Virginia National Guard and their families. The love of our entire country is pouring out for them, and we are lifting them up in our prayers. As we are filled with anguish and grief for those who were shot, we're also filled with righteous anger and ferocious resolve. As President of the United States, I am determined to ensure that the animal who perpetrated this atrocity pays the steepest possible price. I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan.
Well, President Donald Trump, responding to questions following that from the press, repeated law enforcement identification of the suspect and emphasized that he had entered the country in 2021. His remark renewed political debate over immigration vetting, resettlement programs, and national security policies. The shooting has triggered heightened security measures across Washington, with federal and local agencies coordinating to track possible links, assess motive, and evaluate whether the suspect acted alone. Officials have urged the public to avoid speculation as investigators work to establish the full circumstances surrounding the attack. And over to Australia. It is on the verge of enforcing world-first legislation that bans users under 16 years old from accessing social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok starting December 10th. In response, an internet rights group, the Digital Freedom Project, has filed a legal challenge in the High Court representing two 15-year-olds on behalf of millions of young Australians. The group argues that the law represents an unfair restriction on freedom of expression and deprives youth of the modern digital town square, which is integral to social, educational, and civic participation. Now, while policymakers cite protection against cyberbullying, online grooming, and mental health risk, critics contend that blanket bans fail to address underlying issues and may inadvertently isolate children from positive social engagement. The case has global significance as other nations may look to Australia as a precedent for balancing child protection with digital rights. The outcome could influence international debates on youth autonomy, government regulation of tech platforms, and online freedom of speech, marking a turning point in the digital era. From the halls of power in Moscow and Brasilia to streets in Washington, D.C. and courts and parliaments across Italy and Australia, today's headlines reflect a world grappling with diplomacy, justice, security, and social change. And as nations navigate these complex challenges, one question still remains: how will leadership, law, and societal values shape the path ahead for every citizen everywhere? Well, until next time, this has been the Flash News. Thank you for joining in.